So today on A Fresh Face in Hell, we're going to talk to another one of my old buddies on the show who happens to be the most down-to-earth rock star you will ever meet, a guy with zero pretense, whom fame has not changed a bit since I met him over 4 decades ago. And we probably won't get to half the stuff I wanted to talk to him about. But before we get to him, a little housekeeping. Now that things have slowed down a bit for me on the book tour front, we're finally launching the Fresh Face in Hell newsletter on Substack. You'll find the link below the show description. Please sign up for additional special content, including the video portion of this and other interviews, plus other fun stuff, musings, maybe even some Bigfoot stuff. It's all free for now, but soon it'll cost $11,000, so be sure to get in on the ground floor of the newsletter on Substack. Very well, back to today's guest. You may remember him from a band called Deranged Diction, or maybe a band called Green River, or perhaps Mother Love Bone, but you'll almost certainly remember him from a rock and roll outfit called Pearl Jam. Please welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell, Jeff Ament. So, Jeff, welcome to the show, buddy. I really appreciate you showing up.
What's going on, Johnny?
On time. What a pro. So, my origin story with you goes back to, I always forget if it's 1982 or 1983, that one glorious year of the Metropolis where we all hung out in front or out in the parking lot. I don't know if it was 82 or 83.
83.
But 83. I met you and Sergio, and I'm not even sure if you guys had made the move from Missoula yet, or you were just still coming on weekends and sort of transitioning to become a Seattle band.
No, I only had enough money for one trip. So we made the trip over. It was like late April 83. I quit school early that year. Actually, that was the last time I went to school. So, made the trip over. I think I still had $40 in my pocket. We lived with my friend Randy Peprock, who was in a punk rock band in Seattle. He came from Missoula and he was hyping up the Metropolis. He said, this new hardcore club's opening up. Here's the first 5 shows. You know, it was like Channel 3 and Whipping Boy, and it was all bands that I loved. So I was like,
I booked that Whipping Boy show.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my first 13,
Man,
14 years old. Yeah.
That was a great show, man. Do you guys play that show?
I don't think we played. No, I just brought him up and he stayed in Mike Fricky's house. The whole band stayed, but I've still been in touch with Eugene and I've talked to Dave a few times over the year. Those guys were impressive because they were all like Stanford grads and stuff like that. And I was just like
kind of criminally underrated when people talk about hardcore. That their name doesn't come up, and that record holds up, man. It's a really good record.
It really does, and so did their tune on the Not So Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah.
So I just remember meeting you, and I thought, I was really impressed because you were a few years older, and that's a few big years in development. Like now, I know you only had $40 in your pocket, but it seemed like you had your shit together. I mean, you had a van, you had a band that had I dare I say, not a brand. I don't want to use that word because it's so not punk rock, but I mean, you guys had a certain style to your flyers and you had a demo tape, which was the thing then. And you were relocating. It's like, you know, from my 14-year-old perspective, it looked like you were a guy with a plan. Now, I mean, maybe now that we're old fogies, it looks a little like, you know, cuff of the sleeve stuff, but I was impressed because, and you continue to impress me because, you know, there was that time you recorded all those bands in your basement and you basically
the Young Fresh Fellows basement.
Yeah. Okay. I thought, were you living in that house?
Yeah. They all lived upstairs and I had the basement. I had to build out I had to put a wall between the rehearsal space and my bedroom, which was a little futon, my records.
Living large. Well, things haven't changed much in that regard, have they? So, I had Steve Turner on the show a while back, and I'm gonna jump through the nostalgic '80s because people want to hear the you know, because then it becomes about my involvement. Nobody cares about that. But we had Steve on a couple months ago, and who of course was your bandmate in Green River, and we talked about the different personalities and interests at work. In Green River. And having known you guys individually, I know for all the common ground you guys shared musically in terms of influence, each of you had different influences as well. There's some great pictures from that era that I feel like just encapsulate that perfectly, because you've got like you're in like a fog of Aquanet. Your hair's like teased up, and like Steve's got short hair and some skinny pants and kind of a waistcoat and short hair, looking kind of Brit mod. And Stoney's got the David Johansen feather boa thing going on, and Mark's just Mark but with longer hair. And
but if you look at the evolution of the photos, at the beginning, Steve had long hair.
yeah,
And
that's true. And Alex had short hair.
And as soon as I said, "Man, I dig your hair, Steve," he cut it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you guys really started it, but it was kind of like you all sort of adopted a different look. And so, and I also know just from your different musical tastes and stuff, I just want to walk by, for those that don't know, I got to get better at this, is like the layman stuff. Green River was kind of a watershed moment for the Seattle scene. I mean, it is the band that sort of, I guess, kind of spawned Pearl Jam and Mudhoney, after you disbanded. But this was kind of a very unique band. I mean, Seattle was pretty much hardcore. We had Malfunction, which was very different. We'll talk about that. But can we walk through like who brought what to the I mean, just individually. I mean, when I look at that roster, and I know that you guys were listening to different stuff and bringing, I know I've talked to you before about how practices were kind of exciting. Sometimes people would show up and you got to hear this, but it was coming from all over the place. Alex was bringing like, let's go through that from your perspective. Like, for all your similarities and your friendships and stuff, let's talk about some of the different influences that shape, just one at a time, like you and Mark and Stoney and Steve and Alex and then later Bruce.
Well, I think the common ground initially, even before that Stone played in the band, the common ground was kind of the heavier hardcore bands, and specifically Black Flag. I think every single guy would say we were shooting for Damaged / My War, Black Flag.
Yeah, I was gonna say My War too.
That's what we were aiming for. And even before I was in Green River, Deranged Diction started to peel off into that. I had written like 2 or 3 kind of slower numbers that were kind of had that My War. Flipper had a thing too, man. That was like
so dirgy
and so powerful and great words. So Black Flag was the initial thing, and then I think all of us loved music so much. Like we when we went on little road trips and stuff, everybody brought tapes. Everybody was trying to turn each other onto things. I remember playing records for those guys. I remember going over to Steve's house and having him play records for us. I think all of us trying. I think I love Sisters of Mercy and kind of the goth stuff, which Alex was totally into that world. I don't think Steve liked that stuff at all. I think Mark maybe liked it a little bit. Stone when Stone joined the band, Stone came from a completely non-hardcore place. He was into UFO and Iron Maiden.
I remember a lot of hair metal going over to his house, and he was hanging out with like the Rob Weber and the Friel brothers, listening to Shadow and like.
And I remember him playing Iron Maiden for me, and I didn't do anything for me. I remember thinking like and then as time went on, like he would bring in these riffs, and then we would sort of we would all play our version of what a riff that he was bringing in, and it would sort of turn this straight up Iron Maiden riff into us, and Mark's doing his thing over the top of it. Alex playing, doing his goth drumming, or, trying to be like Martin Atkins or, a lot of toms. And, so I think the beginning of when all that was sort of coming together, it was really super interesting to me. Like, and I think that second EP, the Dry as a Bone EP, that's when none of us really had more of an influence than the other. And it was like equal parts of 5 different takes on the riff or the song. And so I think as time went on, that next record, like I was listening to like a lot of sort of weird industrial stuff at that time. There was this band Until December. I'd just seen Depeche Mode play a show who I didn't really like, but who were incorporating lots of triggers and stuff with the drums. And so we were trying to do all this stuff in the studio. Like, how do you trigger a snare drum with I remember we recorded a hammer hitting an anvil to get that dong. And then we were triggering that with the snare drum to try to, we were going for an industrial thing. And I think it sort of came off as probably more hair metal. And even when you say that I look like hair metal, I worked at the raison d'etre that was all cross dressers, and so those people were all dressing me and like telling me, oh, you should do this. Oh, if you just put a little something on your eyelashes, like, man, you have such great eyes. And so I was more influenced by Dina Martina Grady, who I worked with every morning, than I was Cinderella or whatever was going on.
Yeah, it was just the look on the hair, but you had some other elements that became, I don't know, you were the first on board. You're the first guy I ever saw the cargo shorts over the long johns, which became an adopted look for the 90s Seattle. And I credit you for that one.
I was a bicycle rider,
That's Ament couture right there. It's classic. And then, it was just interesting. You brought up a good point. I mean, you guys evolved together. I just feel like in a short period of time, that was such an interesting petri dish of Seattle music. And it didn't always work. Like the first EP is kind of Frankenstein-ish. Like you can really feel the collision of these different elements, and there's a little dissonance there. And I've talked to you guys before about not being happy about the recording and having it remastered later, but then things started to coalesce a little bit more. And we're only talking about a short period of time. I mean, in certain ways it's really, I always goes back to those Metropolis days is the most exciting days for Seattle music because I was there, right? So I had a personal, but like when I think about it in perspective, like what you guys were doing in the mid 80s in that switching of gears, like, and everybody sort of branching out more musically from about say 85 to 87, that it just seemed like an incredible, all those different personalities in that band and all those different influences and coalescing into like, I mean, Dry as a Bone is kind of, I mean, there is no Seattle sound. We know that. I mean, because, Alice in Chains doesn't really sound like Nirvana, doesn't really sound like the Screaming Trees, but Dry as a Bone kind of has it all. You know what I mean? Dry as a Bone, it has kind of I listen to it and I go, I can hear the Black Sabbath. I can hear the Johnny Thunders. I can hear I can hear all the different influences. And it's fascinating because then that band, that split into the twin rivers of Green River and Mudhoney. So talk to me about that. It seems like, because Mudhoney and you going on to, but first, of course, I'm skipping, Mother Love Bone and Mookie Blaylock here. I want to come back to that. But just in general, sort of you and Stone sensibility versus Steve and Mark's sensibility, say. And then, I don't know, Alex maybe kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, when I think about every step that I've taken since I moved to Seattle, it was always about like following the energy. Like you'd meet, when I met Mark or when I met Alex, like it was like they had a excitement about music, and I just remember having these long conversations about what we were listening to and why we were listening to it. And, oh, you like that song? Well, this second song on side B. And I think as Green River went on, we had less and less of those conversations because it got more polarized. I mean, before Steve left the band, he was playing as like the Milkshakes. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, it was like this really clean sounding sort of garage.
It sounds like the Sonics, basically.
But less
really
heavy.
Yeah.
Like I could see he would play the Sonics. I'd be like, oh, I dig that. But like the Milkshakes to me was a little bit more jangle pop to me. I mean, it still has that garage element, but I think all of us probably have a little bit of the we're trying to be different. We're all trying to show each other that we're like our own men and that we have our own image. And I think as time went on, that it just sort of polarized us a little bit. And then, there were big moments along the way where maybe Stoney and I would love something, and Mark and those guys wouldn't. And so
I think there was one night when you guys saw Jane's Addiction in LA, and you and Stone
Yeah.
were kind of in it, and Steve and Mark were like, nah, we don't,
Yeah.
this is a little corporate or something for me.
It wasn't even corporate. I just remember like, oh my God, this is awful, and Stone and I were having a moment. Like I remember watching my rhythm section going like, holy shit, man, that's what I want to do. Like like it seemed wild, and it seemed totally original. And I didn't think that Perry had a particularly technically good voice, but he was making it work, and he had the crowd wrapped around his finger. In a lot of ways, very similar to what Mark was. I mean, Mark is such an incredible frontman, and I think even though maybe he couldn't, he didn't have a 3-octave range or whatever, like he had a thing. He has a thing, man. He has a totally original thing that maybe towards the end of Green River, maybe we didn't. Maybe towards the end we didn't appreciate each other enough. Ultimately, because we were all sort of pushing to, I don't know, just do something different. And Mark, to his credit, man, he that last Green River record, I mean, any other singer could have said like, man, this isn't my thing. This is my jam, and he went along with it and sort of made those songs great, I think, because of what he brought to the table on those songs.
Well, I mean, 4 or 5 guys in their early 20s navigating that. I mean, I know how, I mean, dude, I was 39 before I could even get my career off the ground because of my ego and like, you know what I mean? Like, and being in a band is so much like such a relationship. It's like a 5-way marriage, like it's incredible that you guys could get anything off the ground. You know what I mean? Because I just remember there's just that age, that adolescent, you're finding yourself, and you just said it, like everybody has their image and their personality and their influences, and everybody's got an idea. It's sort of amazing that you guys pulled it off at all. And I think the fact that it didn't ever quite completely coalesce tells the story. I mean, like that's just it. It was a band that could barely sustain the force of its own invention. Whereas, Pearl Jam, by the time everybody is mature enough and you guys find Eddie, everybody kind of, this is my impression. We'll get into that. It seems to kind of, A, everyone's more mature. B, everybody's already experienced some sort of trajectory of success and is kind of settled into it or whatever. But like, there wasn't, it would seem like the striving involved. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, think about the 20s. Like, most of us were terrible at talking through problems and closing up relationships. I mean, I didn't have very many girlfriends in my 20s, but the ones that I had usually ended with just like, you just stopped answering the phone. It was a total,
like,
yeah.
I didn't have many relationships that lasted more than 6 months after my high school sweetheart. Yeah.
But I mean, stuff just like sort of flames out. And I think that happened with a lot of bands at that time. You think about, I mean, you guys were an incredible band, and you think about Feast, and there are so many bands that I think really didn't get the credit they deserve. And a lot of it was just that they never had a chance to be even partially realized, like there was that initial, jolt of energy, and then it just petered out. And
I was just trying to grow pubic hair, dude. I mean, it's
right.
Like, I mean, like, but I feel like, I don't know. I mean, my experience in bands is so short-lived, but it's touched and shaped my whole life. Understanding the dynamics at work there, it is so hard. The fact that Pearl Jam has, what are we going on, 30?
Yeah, 34
years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's incredible. And I mean, I want to get into the whole continuum of that, because I just finished a novel about a long relationship, about a 70-year
amazing.
marriage,
Great
and everything
book.
that takes. And I kind of want to frame like being in that band that long and that way as well. But before I go there, we're talking about we talked about Pearl Jam Green River, and how certain bands didn't necessarily their sound didn't fit quite under the grunge umbrella or whatever. which usually encompasses like Nirvana, Tad, Screaming Trees. Those bands add a little something more in common when you put their sound together, at
Sure.
least like guitar sound and things like that.
Yeah.
A sound I've always viewed as much as anything else, kind of a hardcore meets early heavy metal sound, Sabbath, Cooper, etc. But let's talk about another band in Seattle family tree that does not fit neatly into this perceived sound, which is Malfunction, who I first saw, I think, in 1981 at it was either the Grange Hall or the Masonic Temple or whatever.
Yeah.
And now here's a band that is not a hardcore band at all. I mean, it's hard to even define what they are.
Yeah.
And yet they're accepted by the hardcore fan. When I first saw Malfunction, Andy still had short hair. This is pre-makeup. How do you think? I mean, but they were they were such an outlier, but they were totally accepted by the punk crowd. Why do you think that worked? Do you think that was all? Can we chalk that mostly up to just the charisma of Andy? Like, Andy was just so good at just selling it. It's like he already was a rock star, like, in his head, and he worked it. There could be 8 people in the room, but, like, for him, from his point of view, there was, like, 80,000, you know what I mean? And it was like Budokan. And that's just sort of a natural charisma and belief, and I feel like he sold a band to us that didn't have anything in common with anybody else really playing, but
Yeah, he always had that mischievous kind of smile and glint in his eye, like when he was doing the whole like, "Hello, peoples, we're here from Olympus," and kind of that whole spiel. The first time I saw him was at the Metropolis, like probably the first month of the Metropolis, and I remember Regan and Kevin were on stage playing, and they're doing this whole rave up thing at the beginning, and I hear the bass, and all of a sudden I hear like vocals, and I'm going like what's going on here? And everybody turned around and looked, and he was walking across the bar of the Metropolis with a wireless mic on and like singing the song and doing his whole strutty thing with that lavender. It was like a Steinberger looking bass. They had
didn't have any headstock.
Yeah. And that show, and there was a couple other show. There was a Graven image show that was at White House. It was like a weird industrial band that they opened up for. That show ended up ending quickly because Walter or one of those dudes walked through the plate glass window trying to get in. But that Malfunction show, I remember Kevin was mixed down a little bit, just ripping, and it was just a wall. It was like, because Andy's bass was, I would say Andy's bass playing was almost the most hardcore thing about the band, and Regan a little bit too. But Regan had a swing about him. But Andy, it was like Discharge to me. It was really distorted, and he was sort of like kind of Lemmy Motorhead vibe. And I just remember, like, if the mix was right, if Kevin was tucked in, and it was just like that flurry of just shredding that was kind of behind it, it was the greatest thing ever. And if Kevin was too loud, and if you couldn't hear the vocals, it was not great.
Well, the other thing is like Andy was tasked with carrying the melody with a bass, which isn't in a tall order, as you know.
Yeah,
you know what
right.
I mean? You're not necessarily you're just supposed to be in the pocket and driving,
Yeah.
But Kevin, God love him. I mean, he's a masterful guitar player, but I was always a proponent of, please, second guitarist. You know what I mean? Because I want some
sure.
melody. I mean, some of those
Yeah.
songs are hookier than you'll ever know because it's just, he was like the,
please give me a power chord.
yeah, I know, and that's I feel like if they had added a second guitarist, they might have been Jane's Addiction before Jane's Addiction. I mean, the sound was kind of, you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
agree.
mean, it's interesting. People don't talk about Andy's bass playing so much because we always talk about him, as a front man, but like that was a tall order, you know what I mean? You were basically providing the melody and driving the band. Regan, of course, is a great drummer. Kevin, as I said, was a great guitar player, but like, I just, we wanted, power chords were everything, dude. You had to have them. And just power in general.
And that band was, it was the first time I realized how important the mix was for a band. Like, if the mix was a little bit off for any band, like, oftentimes in those hardcore shows, you couldn't hear the vocals. And if the vocalist was the strongest part of the band, you couldn't hear them, the show sucked. And there was a lot of shows in those early days where I felt like I didn't get to hear the best version of the bands. And Malfunction was that sort of a band half the time. Half the time I was like, man, it's like too much. It's when the balance gets out. It's like too much heavy metal, not enough. What you're saying, like not enough introducing me to the next part. I need a big when it goes from the E to the G. I need to hear that G come in, or you can't tell there's even a song there. So,
Right.
but
I mean, like, see, even jazz knows that, right? Jazz will
yep.
spiral, but like even the solos come back to the melody over and over again. They spiral back into the melody. Let's talk about the formation of Mother Love Bone, because that is also, your involvement in that band and like, it's an eclectic mix of personnel. Let's talk about how that came about.
Well, not that long after that Jane's Addiction show where that Stone and I loved, and we Green River broke up. It was not the cleanest of breakups. It was I think Stone and I had already decided that we wanted to do something else. And I remember right at the same time I was working at the Raison, and I remember Stone and I had been talking about wanting to do a different kind of a band, and the band hadn't broken up yet. And Jonathan Poneman came down, who had just started working with Bruce at Sub Pop, and he said, "Hey, I think we got enough money together to get you guys a van." And it was the first time ever that anybody wanted to help us financially, because all those records before that, we paid for every part of them. Like, I mean, we were giving Bruce Pavitt money to put out ads and fanzines across the country. So um, I remember going back to Stone on my little lunch break. I rode my bike down to where he was working in Pioneer Square, and I said, "Hey man, maybe we should keep the band together. We have a record about to come out, and they're gonna give us a van." It was a big deal.
I
And
know, I know. I mean, this is a world where like a fucking record was everything. Like, you
yeah,
had a demo tape that was
yeah.
something.
And Stone was like, I'm kind of not into it. And then there was a short period of time where we were talking about moving to LA, which thank the Lord that never happened. I mean,
Well,
I
McCready went and did it for you, and then
right,
came
right.
back and got a job, like, doing ice cream or whatever. And then, I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Yeah, and I think that was I just didn't have the money. I think Stone probably had figured out a way to like do it, but I was like, I gotta work for 6 months to save up my money if I'm gonna do that. And by
and
the
there was a
time
lot of pay to play going on down there at that
oh
point
yeah.
too, which, like, who knew how much you guys realized that, like, from afar, like how the cultural with, because Seattle was so DIY in every way. Like, LA had an actual infrastructure, you
Yeah.
know, clubs that didn't disappear in 6 months, and you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, no, you dodged a bullet on that one. However, the Mother Love Bone sound, you're not all the way to the generation yet, so get me there. So Stone finally came around on starting the band.
Yeah, so right around that same time, Stone said, and I knew, in fact, I think maybe Andy, I'm trying to think. I think Andy started working at the Raison kind of right in that zone. And uh, Stone said, "Hey, I'm gonna play at Tugs tomorrow. I'm gonna do a couple songs with Andy. You should come down." And I had seen Andy do a solo show before, and I remember thinking like, I don't know what this is, because again, like the mix of it, he's like playing his little keyboard thing with the keyboard drum sounds, and kind of almost more being a comedian over the top of the Casio tone beat than playing songs. And it was funny and whatever, but it didn't seem that musical to me. And I went down and saw Stone play with him, and they did 2 songs, and Stone was playing acoustic guitar, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's incredible." Like, then it all of a sudden went from this, uh, comedy act, it turned into T-Rex. Like, there were real songs, there were and, and I knew enough about Andy at that time. I was like, I wasn't sure. I knew it was gonna be I knew being in a band with Andy was gonna be a lot, because he's just like he's got energy, seeping from every pore in his body. And I think life was hard for him. Just, normal day-to-day stuff. And so I sort of knew from working at the Raison with him that for how often he was late for work, I knew he was probably going to be late for rehearsals. And I've always had a hard time with that stuff. But seeing that show at Tugs with Stone was transcendent. Like, it was like, I was like, oh my God, like, this is, he's Mark Bolan. He's completely encapsulated. Like, he could just completely pull that thing off. And Stone coming in and just giving him a foundation for songs.
See, that's it. Foundation. That's what the
Yep.
lack of rhythm guitar, that's what the Malfunction sound lacked, is that foundation
Yep.
for him to be on top of.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, the Mother Love Bone thing was right off the bat. The Dale Gloria, who had gotten us some Green River shows in LA, I sent her you know, the first demo tape that we did, that we made probably within a month of being a band. And we got shows, and she wanted to give us a demo deal. So, like, right out of the gate, we had interest. There was like these 7 or 8 songs, most of which didn't end up on anything, didn't end up on the records. But on that strength, you know, we had major label interest because Dale was, at that time, she knew Anna Statman, who was working at Slash Records, who then moved to Geffen. And, you know, within the first 2 months of the band being together, we had major label interest. And
there's Michael Goldstone. Wasn't that the name of the guy?
yeah, he was the last guy to come in. He came in, I remember he worked at Polygram, and he booked out the Moore for us, and we did we basically played a show for him. And this was after, like, Atlantic and Geffen and Warner Brothers and all these people had taken us, as Andy called, the Great Seattle Restaurant Tour, because we would make them take us to Il Bistro, or, you know, all the fancy restaurants in town that none of us had ever eaten at. And we would order, you know, expensive bottles of wine. And but Michael was the last guy to come in, and for whatever reason, we went with the last guy, probably because it felt like he wasn't blowing a ton of smoke, you know, whereas most of those other guys, you could tell right off the bat. Like, I think most Seattle folks have a bullshit detector, you know, from the that LA vibe. So Michael was good for us mostly.
So after, you know, at this point, you're looking at 6-7 years in punk bands. Like, your biggest victory so far has been somebody helping you buy a van. I mean, your biggest sort of material victory. I mean, and I know
that we rejected,
getting $40 a show to split, you know, 4 ways, playing at the Metropolis or the Grey Door or something like that. What was that like? This is 89, so you're like, what, how old are you? About 26 at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like 87, early 88 when all that was going on. So yeah, I was 25 or something, 24, 25.
What was that like suddenly? Because it seemed like it happened so suddenly. Like, the minute you get one sort of bite from LA, the minute you get one A&R guy, that it just seemed like it turned into a bit of a feeding frenzy. And so you guys went from 0 to 60 so fast. And it seemed like you dealt with it really well. It seemed like Stoney dealt with it really well. I don't know about Andy, because I don't know where the intersection of the drug use and that came, you know what I mean? How much the pressure of suddenly getting all that attention exacerbated that element of it. But, like, take me through your mental state at that point. It's like, whoa, you know, I mean, like, I had to work so hard before I was successful. I mean, like, I just didn't even expect it anymore. And when it finally happened, I was like, oh boy, about time. I'm fucking 40 years old here. But, like, you guys were still ready to keep going down that path a little. And it just seemed like almost the success might have seemed unexpected and quick.
I mean, it was unexpected and quick, but I was 25, 26 years old, and I had been working day jobs and, you know, living paycheck to paycheck with zero safety net. You know, there was no going home for me, or there was no calling my parents and saying, like, hey, can you loan me $100? Or, and so I think, as soon, you know, including the Jonathan Ponma wanting to get us a van, I think anytime somebody wanted to help anything I was doing a little bit, I was ready to accept it, because I hadn't had any help.
I'm still there, dude.
Just
I
so
mean, yeah, I say yes to everything.
so when Anna Statman called and said, "Hey, you know, we're going to give you $2,000 to go in the studio and make a demo," we'd never spent $2,000 making a record. So we were like, "Awesome, we can go in with Jack and Dino for 10 days and mess around and for $2,000." And so um I was ready for that to happen. I was ready for somebody else to pay for us to make music. Are you kidding me? Like that's, there's, well, I don't even think any of us knew that was possible.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's just so that's what I mean by unexpected. Like, because there was never again, it's like a difference between LA and Seattle. Like, where there's a musical infrastructure in Seattle, I think you probably grow up in bands there having an awareness of that. Like, this road eventually leads to that, and then we're gonna four-wall some or three-wall some clubs or whatever, and then we're gonna try to attract some A&R. People didn't think like that in Seattle, so it just seems like such heady times. I mean, I know looking back, like, my most exciting times were when I was just starting to get traction and the opening up this whole world, like, gosh, there is this way that, like, maybe I can make my living as an artist, which never really even seemed like a
Yeah.
possibility before, and it doesn't get better than that. I mean, once you make your living as an artist, not to complain about first world problems, but a lot of the vagaries and the problems that brings along are not as sort of living by the seat of your pants exciting or, genuinely is thrilling in that respect, I think. It's a little more ho-hum, and you're a little more I think you become a little more once you have achieved it, maybe a little more business-minded or organized or protective of continuing to sustain that versus just I don't
Ye
know.
Yeah, I think so much of it for me was like, you mean I can quit my job and we were paying ourselves $400 a month. So that was roughly what I was making working at the Raison, but all of a sudden then I had this thing where it's like, "Oh, I can write songs again. I'll have time to write songs again." I mean, I was waking up at 5 in the morning, opening the restaurant, getting on my bike at 2 o'clock, riding up to Stone's house for rehearsal at 3 o'clock. I didn't have time to write songs, or really be an artist. And in my spare time, I was like designing T-shirts and making the flyers for the shows, or calling the promoter to try to get on, you know, the bill with Jane's Addiction or Red Cross or whoever was coming through town. And I was so excited, like, wow, at least for this next 6 to 12 months, like, I can just be an artist. I can like actually really fully like basically go back to what I was doing when I was in college and when I was in a hardcore band. I was writing half those songs, of Deranged Addiction. So like all of a sudden I had the time again to like do it, to like really be 100% artist. And I honestly at that time felt like this might only last a year, and then I might be back working in a restaurant. And I was totally fine with that. But I was so excited to have the time, to like work stuff out. And I bought a 4 track and like, got a second bass and like, got a microphone and like, I had a little setup at home, and that was sort of life changing. It's I imagine like a writer would be like, I got an electric typewriter.
I mean, just the fact that having somebody do something for you. I mean, I grew up like you. I just do it all yourself. You just said it.
Yeah.
You had to call the promoter. You had to make the flyers. You had to wear every hat. So I'm still relieved, like when I get a publicist helping me or whatever, an editor, anybody who wants to help me in marketing with all that stuff, so that I don't have to do as much of it. I wish I didn't have to do any of it. We would all love to just be an artist and sit in our ivory tower, but you still got to hustle as an artist, more and more as we enter like you guys got into music in the last, I mean, when you guys, when Pearl Jam and Mother Love Bone, those last days of Mother Love Bone and Pearl Jam, those are the last days of the great bloated infrastructure and when you had all these middlemen and record companies
Yeah.
were throwing money at you and giving you developmental deals and things like that. Those things quickly disappeared, and that has happened in the publishing paradigm as well. So like I'm getting a vicarious thrill from what you're saying about, like, God, how fun it was to like have somebody else helping me do what I want to do.
And I don't know about you, but I don't even think I thought that where we ended up was possible. It's like people always say like, "Oh, your dreams came true." It's like, dude, that wasn't a dream. Like, we were just like putting one foot in front of the other and going like, "Oh, sweet man, I bugged this promoter so much we got the show with PIL," or you know, it there wasn't this long term goal of like someday I'm gonna like have a Porsche and a mansion in Capitol Hill and whatever the stereotype of, being a rock star, being in a rock band is or whatever. Like, I wanted to make shit. I wanted to make art and I wanted to have the freedom to like sit at my table in my kitchen and like draw and like come up, just make stuff. Like and it's still to this day, it's all I'm trying to do is carve out a few hours every day to make shit because it's the greatest thing in the world. And as you know, as a writer, when you start with nothing or a couple ideas or a character or whatever, and at the end of the day, you got like 4 paragraphs or you got a song or you put some chords together and you feel good. It's like,
You made something from nothing.
oh my God, it's like, and I feel so lucky that I've been able to do it for most of my adult life, but it's like, it's still to this day, it's the fucking greatest thing in the world. It's like, there's nothing greater than making shit out of nothing. Waking up in the morning, you can you got your cup of coffee, you don't know what the hell is going on. You just start writing, you start playing your guitar a little bit. And in 2 hours, you got a little part where you're like, wow, that's fucking cool.
That is the greatest reward, and a lot
Yeah.
of people, I think, on the outside don't really understand that. They think that they wanna occupy the space of the writer, they think it would be so cool to be a writer or a musician and get all that, all the fanfare and glory, but, like, the truth is, like, just making it, just that's the truth. That's what kept me going after n 9 unpublished novels, is I just had to do it, I love it. So Mother Love Bone, though they sounded not very Seattle at all. Well, maybe a different kind of Seattle, but not like not what we were calling the Seattle sound. And yet, like Malfunction, you guys had a ton of goodwill in Seattle. You know what I mean? Despite the fact that the sound was a little more produced, a little more I remember being very proud and playing it to my friends because I'd moved down to the Bay Area and I was like, I mean, it was kind of a I have friends that made records before, but this one sounds like it was in a studio. It's like it was really kind of polished. It was like, look, my musician friends have grown up or something. Now, I kind of feel like between Andy's death, which we won't dwell on, but then Eddie joining and you guys morphing in from Mookie Blaylock to Pearl Jam, I feel like you guys at the beginning almost lost a little of that goodwill.
Yeah, I think every step of the way, the scene would get split in half. I think when Green River broke up, the scene got split in half, and half of the people or more even went towards Mudhoney because it's like, why wouldn't you go with those guys? And then I think it happened again. I think when Andy died, I think then our little part of the scene got split in half again, and then it was I mean, I know I was getting it, like, if you're out in a bar past midnight, somebody come up and start talking shit about Ed or whatever, and it would almost end up in some kind of a fight, and there was a thing about him being from out of town and whatever, but the main thing was when I first met Ed and had all those conversations early on, that guy just wanted to make shit. He just wanted to make art, he didn't wanna fuck around, he didn't care about being famous, he didn't care about, like, whatever. I mean, I remember him saying, like, "When you pick me up from the airport, I don't wanna mess around, I don't wanna go get coffee, I wanna go straight to the rehearsal studio, and I wanna start working." And we
So
had
that's kind of music to your ears because
oh
I
my
know
god,
because you were that guy kind of. I mean, you
totally.
wanted to organize. You handled it like a working man. It's like, come on, we got to stay on task here, guys. We only have this much time to make things work.
And we talked about making T-shirts and putting up flyers and kind of all the pre-fill, which I'll be honest, like, I didn't have a whole ton of help in that and with doing those things or making the phone calls to the promoters or, all the sort of thankless stuff that usually bass players do. And then all of a sudden I'm talking to a singer he's been that guy in his bands. And so I was like, fucking awesome, man. I got a partner in crime, in doing this other stuff. And to this day, he and I, there's a there's a handful of things in the band that we collaborate, we collaborate on the artwork and we collaborate on the light show and those things. And there's nothing like collaborating with people that you've love and trust, and you aren't afraid to say, I don't like that idea. And you're not afraid for them to tell you that they don't like your idea. And it's, that it's the reason that we're still together 34 years later, is that it's been able to, and not just with Ed and I, but everybody in the band, everybody sort of reading the room and going like, oh man, Ed brought in some really good songs. I'm just going to like try to make those songs as great as I can make them. And the next time we make a record, he doesn't have any songs. So then you're like, hey, I got this song, or I got these 2 songs, or I got these 3 songs. And everybody's sort of, just going with the flow. And sometimes it's disappointing. Sometimes you work really hard, and by the time you've figured the record out, you don't have any songs on the record. And you're like, fuck, man, I worked for 2 years, like coming up with this group of songs, and not one of them was good enough to be on the record. And then the next time you'll barely try it all, and you'll have 4 songs or 5 songs or half the record you'll have your fingers in. And so that to me has been the key of the band, just everybody sort of looking at the long game and going like, it's not the end of the world if you don't get yours today, because if you just keep doing your thing, at some point somebody's going to recognize that you're doing something cool and it's going to fit the group. The last record we made, that was as exciting of a record as we've ever made. And that's, fuck, man, what a, I don't want to say blessing, because I don't believe in that shit, but it's like, what a gift to have as a 60-year-old. We could all be washed up and jaded and whatever, but what a gift to like be excited about a group of songs and working together, and like, and then having it be appreciated a little bit, like people
just a little bit.
Seem to like the record. No, but it's like a
I love your energy, dude. I wish you guys could see Jeff, because he's just, the energy is the love is so true and so sincere, and you're just not the least bit jaded about any of it, which I totally admire and appreciate. I don't think anybody who's never been in a band understands how hard that is to stay together for 34 years. And you talk about that dynamic about you guys. It's like a marriage. But you guys, it all seems, what are the commonalities, I think, that hold it together? Like in a marriage, it's like trust, communication. Is there skill sets I should know about in case I ever start a band?
Well, I think it's like it's like a marriage or a friendship, where if you really care about the person, like if you respect them and you love them, you're sort of willing to like go through a lot with them, or put up with a lot at times. And I think at any given time with our band, I'm sure each of us would say like, oh yeah, that time between 2003, 2006, man, you were a fucking pain in the ass. And I think, again, it's part of it's reading the room, and part of it's like knowing when to step up and say like, hey man, I think we're getting off track here. Or I think you're getting off track here. But not being too heavy handed with it, and not having anything behind it except for like, you care about the person. I mean, to be honest, the last 15 years, I've had a few conversations where I've said, I don't care if we're not a band anymore. I just want to be good with you. I want to be good with each other. I want to be able to get dinner with you once or twice a year and laugh about the old days or whatever. Like, the most important thing to me is the brotherhood that we have. And because we went through something in the early 90s that only the 4 of us now, well, I mean, Matt was going through his own thing, but we're the only ones that know what that was.
And every other example does not end well. I mean, you look at Nirvana, who you came up simultaneously with, and it was a shit show. I mean, internal strife, bad management, outside forces, personalities that were less prepared or maybe less mature to deal with everything coming at them. Like, I mean, Pearl Jam is a survival story. And last time I saw you in Missoula and we had coffee, you said something sort of jokingly, and you're like, "Dude, even if I wanted to hang it up, I'm in the mafia basically now. These guys have kids, so if they want to tour, I pretty much have to. Like, you can't even get out now." So
Thank God. I mean, it's like, it's a little bit of you know, saving myself from myself, so, it's like, I mean, there really is nothing like gearing up to do it again with these guys. And again, like I said, I think so much, like I have these moments on stage where I'll look at Mike and everything that he's been through, or I'll look at any one of us, the stuff that we've gone through. And you have these moments and you think back like, fuck, man, how did we get through that time in 1994 when it was like we were all hanging on by the seat of our pants and nobody could talk to each other and everybody was kind of afraid to, like, walking on eggshells. It's like, there was a certain amount of wisdom in however we decided to handle it. I don't know what we were doing to handle it, but we did handle it better than some of the other bands did. And some of that probably had to do with, I think Stone and I having gone through, I mean, Stone and I have been playing together for 41 years, which is like, insane that guy and me, like two really, really different people who came from two really different backgrounds. The fact that we're still doing it, and I know I love him more than I've ever loved him in the 41 years.
This is amazing. Yeah. Wow. It's like every time you make an album, it's almost like renewing your vows. I mean, like, because of everything you've had to survive together, and you're still making it work, and you're still, I know, I'm going to use the word blessed, not because of God or anything, but just
Yeah.
because, like, I mean, rock and roll is a young man's game, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And here you are with toting your AARP bag around town, and you're still fucking rocking out. It's pretty amazing. I mean, if you were in a different life, if you were the professional basketball player you probably wanted to be at some point, knowing how much you love hoops, you would have been retired 20 years ago. If you were a Hall of Famer, you'd probably be retiring from the broadcast booth right now. So looking at it from the outside, there seems to be, I want to keep talking about how you guys have made this work. I mean, I think maybe the outside perception is, I mean, in certain ways, it seems like Ed's almost done the band a favor by being the focus of a lot of this outside stuff. Like, sometimes it's just framed as Ed Vedder's band almost, like, but I know that it's much more democratic within the structure of it, right? I mean, it seems like a democracy to me.
Yeah, I think I think he's the guy in the band he's the only guy in the band that has veto power. Um, and that's not totally true, because I think there have been times when the rest of us have said like, man, I'm really not into this, or I'm really not into playing this show, or I'm not into touring right now, or I'm not into that song. Uh, but I mean, he's been so, he's had such a nice touch with how even during the hard times, in the mid-90s when he was really struggling, which I don't know if we were doing a particularly great job at, uh, reaching out to him. I think we just kept showing up, and I think it was hard to sort of, uh, try to imagine what he was going through, and I think especially when, after Kurt died, and, all of a sudden it was really apparent that Kurt died from the pressure. And then I think that pressure ramped up pretty heavy on Ed after that, and I think it ramped up really heavy on Chris. And, I think, he's I mean, he got through it, man, and it's like, it's miraculous, but then it's also just a testament to, you know, the very thing that makes him great is the thing that makes life hard for him, and that he's so sensitive, and he really is reading the room of the band and making sure that we're all okay. And if any one of us is struggling or not feeling a part of it, he's always reached out to us. And pulled us up, and I think we've gotten better at doing that with him in years past. But yeah, man, it's it's like there's been a bunch of books written about Pearl Jam, and they all just miss the whole thing. Like every book that's ever been written about us is just terrible. I mean,
Well, then tell me the stuff they've missed right now.
well, it's just the inner workings of the band and how it's when we're in a room writing a song, or when we're in a room having a hard conversation about how we're going to move forward, or how we're going to, it's the constantly like battling like capitalism and people telling you you can make this and you can be a bazillionaires and you can do this, and just battling that shit and like going like, no, we've always done it this way. And so but those conversations are hard, and at any given time, any one of us can be in a different place in our life, emotionally or financially or whatever. And so it ultimately comes down to us just trusting how we decided to do it 34 years ago. Like we had this idea that, and it was a very idealistic way of thinking about things, but we talk about it all the time, how the art has to be more important than the, like, whatever you're going to make or whatever the accolades are, any of that stuff. All the art, the five of us have to be excited about the art that we're making and the decisions that we're making, and how to get our art out there. And it's not easy. I mean, fuck, man, look what's going on with our administration in the country right now. It's just like capitalism amok. It's like,
Yeah, they're just slashing and burning every check and balance and it's all just a big money grab, man.
and it's under the, they're putting the smoke and mirrors up of LGBTQ and immigrants and all this other stuff, but it's really just trying to, how do we make these 10 guys have all the money?
Yeah. God. It's just,
Fuck.
we can thank Ronald Reagan. That's where it all started. And
Yeah,
it's just gone downhill
sure.
from there. Whatever side of the aisle you're on.
The great Ronald Reagan.
Oh, good Lord. And which is kind of a nice circular place for us to start wrapping up, because Reagan was the sort of unifying source of that, first and second wave hardcore, man. It was like every poster had Reagan on it. Like he was part of the iconography of punk rock in that era. It was just, there's, Rock for Reagan. There's always pictures of Ronnie on the flyers.
I think that was my second show ever in Seattle, was a Rock Against Reagan show at the Metropolis.
God.
I was all
He is Jeff Ament. He is truly, he's the most, I don't even want to call him a rock star because it'll make him blush, but he's the most down to earth dude. He's, thanks for sharing with us. I really, helping us glean some understanding of what makes, in a world of foreigners, even the Kinks, who are such a great band, couldn't sustain it because the Davies brothers were at each other's necks. To me, that's, the music aside, that is one of the greatest, that is the Pearl Jam story to me, is just your ability to endure with this awkward dance between commerce and art, the awkward dance between five people with strong personalities. Like, congratulations, my friend.
Well, so do I have to start a podcast to talk to you about books and like my favorite authors and all that stuff?
Absolutely.
Is that what has to happen?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, anytime. I'll get you back on just to talk about books. Nobody wants to talk about books. Let me let you in on a little secret.
Man, they're missing
Nobody
out.
reads.
They're missing
Nobody
out.
reads, buddy.
They're
It's
missing
depressing.
out, man. I mean, I think there's some of the best writing ever happening right now. So people are missing out.
I agree. There's a lot of great stuff going on. It's the industry doesn't know what they're doing, as you've seen in music. I mean, once the marketing stooges are in charge of the asylum, nobody knows what they're doing. I mean, it has always been. I'm always trying to explain this. It's always been the artists whose job was to have be on the cutting edge and know the pulse of the culture, not the marketing people with their demographics and this is working, so let's do this. That's where it all went wrong with capitalism, is that the artist is the one that dictates what needs to be said about a culture.
And people being afraid to take chances and put, cutting edge art out there because it's not going to sell. It's like,
Yeah, and
I
people
mean,
not giving them the opportunity to.
And if we've learned anything, it's with art it's the long game. A lot of the great artists didn't really get any accolades till they were passed, and that's okay. But it's like as an artist,
Melville, man, Melville was working in the frickin', Melville never made a penny.
Yeah. Well, someday we'll get on and we'll talk about Cormac McCarthy and your books and
we got to talk about basketball too. We'll have
Jess
that
Walter.
conversation over coffee.
You're friends with Jess Walter, right? I love that
you
guy.
bet. Yeah. Well, he can talk basketball with us. Maybe we'll do a
Oh,
podcast with
there
you,
you go.
me, and Jess,
man.
and we'll talk about basketball. Well, thank you, Jeff Ament, for joining us on A Fresh Face in Hell. You're the best,
Love
man.
it. I love you,
you,
Jonathan.
buddy. I love you, man.
Take care, man.
See you, bud.